Right now, as you watch this video, more than 21 million barrels of oil per day are moving through a single narrow corridor of water just 21 miles wide at its tightest point, while Iranian fast attack craft, drones, and anti-ship missile batteries are already in position. And the United States Navy's Fifth Fleet is operating under the highest level of tension recorded in the Gulf since 2019, according to Reuters and the Pentagon's June 2024 posture report. Not a war declaration, not a naval battle, but a chokepoint. At 03:40 a.m. local time this week, commercial tankers began reporting unusual GPS interference near the Strait of Hormuz. No explosions, no headlines, just silence on the water and signals that didn't make sense. And then came the warning. Iranian officials, quoted by Al Jazeera and state media IRNA, did not announce a blockade. They did something far more dangerous. They said they could. One sentence, no timeline, no confirmation. Just enough to move markets, reposition fleets, and trigger contingency plans across Washington, London, and Riyadh within hours. Because this is the part almost nobody is saying out loud. The most powerful navy in human history is now operating inside a battlefield where control is no longer guaranteed, and what happens next will not begin with an explosion. It will begin with a decision. The United States Navy is not losing control of the Gulf because of Iranian firepower. It is losing control because deterrence no longer requires permission to act. That is the shift. That is the story. In the next few minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly how a 21-mile-wide waterway became the most dangerous economic fault line on Earth, and why the balance of power inside it has changed without a single formal declaration of war. We are going to break down two things with precision. First, the military reality on the water, including the specific systems, tactics, and asymmetries that now allow Iran to threaten disruption without ever pulling the trigger. Second, the two paths forward, one that leads to a fragile, negotiated stability, and another that unfolds slowly, quietly, and irreversibly, reshaping global trade, energy prices, and security alliances. And you need to understand this now, because the next 72 hours of this story are going to move fast, and being even 48 hours behind on developments like this is not just being uninformed, it is being economically exposed. So if you are not already subscribed, do it now. Turn on notifications, because this is not just geopolitics. This is the map of what comes next. Rewind to July 19th, 2019, 04:30 p.m. local time, Strait of Hormuz. The air was flat, heavy, heat sitting on the water like glass. A British flag tanker, Stena Impero, was moving north, slow and steady, carrying crude valued at roughly $30 million, according to Lloyd's list. Nothing unusual, no alarms, no distress calls, no visible threat. On the bridge, crew members were monitoring routine navigation, engines steady, course stable, traffic normal. This is one of the busiest maritime arteries on Earth, nearly 1/5 of global oil consumption, about 18 to 21 million barrels per day, flows through here, confirmed by the U.S. Energy Information Administration, EIA. And then, small shapes appeared, fast, low, closing distance. Within minutes, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC vessels surrounded the tanker. No warning shots, no prolonged exchange, just a command, change course, one page, just one page. The vessel complied, engines redirected, course altered. Signal lost. The ship was seized and escorted into Iranian waters. Stop. Read that again. A multi-million-dollar commercial tanker, insured through the backbone of global trade, was redirected in one of the most heavily monitored waterways on Earth, without a shot fired. This is not just a shipping lane, it is the circulatory system of the global economy, and that moment in 2019 was not an isolated incident. It was a preview, because the dry timber had been stacking for years. Sanctions tightening, proxy conflicts expanding, oil markets tightening, and Iran refining a doctrine built on one principle: control the space without owning it. What you are seeing now began then. Revelation number 1. This is not a contest of fleets. It is a contest of geometry and timing. Inside the Strait of Hormuz, the United States Navy brings overwhelming force. The USS Dwight D. Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group, guided missile destroyers like the USS Gravely, advanced surveillance aircraft Layered missile defense systems. According to the Pentagon's 2024 posture statement, the U.S. Fifth Fleet commands assets worth over $70 billion in deployed capability across the region. On paper, it is absolute dominance, but geography does not read balance sheets. At its narrowest, the strait is just 21 miles wide, with designated shipping lanes only 2 miles across in each direction, separated by a 2-mile buffer zone, confirmed by the International Maritime Organization, IMO. That is not open ocean, that is a funnel, and inside that funnel, Iran does not need parity, it needs positioning. According to Reuters, the BBC, and the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, Iran has deployed a layered denial system. Coastal anti-ship missiles like the Noor and Qadr systems range up to 300 kilometers swarm-capable fast attack craft, hundreds of them, designed to overwhelm defense's naval mines, estimated by the U.S. Naval War College at over 5,000 deployable units, armed drones capable of persistent surveillance and strike coordination. Now compare the economics. A single U.S. Navy destroyer, approximately $1.8 billion. An Iranian anti-ship missile, estimated between $500,000 to $1 million, dollar for dollar. $1 million threatens $1.8 billion. Re-listen to that. And then there is doctrine. In May 2024, Hossein Salami, Commander-in-Chief of the IRGC, stated, I quote, "The enemy's ships are within our reach at all times." His words, not mine. Reported by Al Jazeera and IRNA. No timeline, no trigger, just proximity. And proximity in a confined space is power. That is revelation number 1. And we are just getting started. Revelation number 2, and this one nobody saw coming. At 06:12 a.m. local time, the sun rises soft over the Gulf. The water turns pale gold. Deck crews step out with coffee cups. Radios crackle with routine chatter. Cargo logs, engine checks. Ordinary work. On board one tanker, a Filipino crew of 23 men, average age 34, according to International Transport Workers Federation, ITF, records. The morning shift begins like any other, families thousands of miles away, messages queued, wages sent home to cover school fees, rent, medicine. No one is thinking about geopolitics. No one is thinking about missile ranges. They are thinking about breakfast. And then the signal drops. GPS flickers, navigation systems distort. According to CNN and the UK Maritime Trade Operations, UKMTO advisory issued this week, vessels reported electronic interference consistent with deliberate disruption across multiple coordinates in the strait. No explosion, no visible attacker, just confusion. And confusion at sea is lethal, because when a 300,000-ton supertanker loses positional clarity inside a 2-mile shipping lane, it becomes a floating catastrophe. One miscalculation, one delayed command, and you are not talking about a military exchange. You are talking about collision, fire, oil spill, crew trapped. Let that land. One officer, Captain Arvin Dela Cruz, named in an ITF briefing from a prior incident, described it this way: you don't see the threat. You feel it in the silence. Systems go quiet, and you realize you are alone. Alone. In one of the most surveilled waterways on Earth. Then comes the narrative. Officials say, no confirmed attack. They do not say, no deliberate action. He said interference. He did not say accident. That was not an accident. And here is where the story breaks open. Because if disruption can happen without attribution, if fear can be created without force, then who is accountable when something goes wrong? Before we go further, if this level of coverage matters to you, if you want the full picture and not the headlines, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because stories like this do not unfold in public. They unfold in fragments, and you need all of them. So here is the question. When the system fails silently, who do you hold responsible? Revelation number 3, and this one is about what is happening to the institution itself, because what you are watching in the Gulf is not just a confrontation between Iran and the United States. It is a stress test of the entire system that was supposed to prevent this. Here is the list. May 2019, 4 commercial vessels damaged off Fujairah. Attribution disputed. Response delayed. June 2019, 2 tankers attacked in the Gulf of Oman. Insurance premiums spike by 10 to 20% within weeks, according to Lloyd's of London. September 2019, Saudi Aramco facilities hit. 5.7 million barrels per day knocked offline, the largest sudden disruption in oil supply in modern history, confirmed by Reuters and the Saudi Energy Ministry. July 2021, MV Mercer Street drone attack, 2 crew killed. Response, statements, 2023-2024. Repeated GPS interference incidents logged by UKMTO, IMO advisories, and reported by BBC and CNN. 2024, expanded naval patrols announced. No reduction in incidents. No single failure, a pattern. Now layer the timing. Diplomatic talks paused, sanctions tightened, regional proxy conflicts expanding, naval presence increased, and yet, disruption continues. Say that again. The system designed to secure the world's most critical energy corridor has more ships, more surveillance, more coordination than ever before, and less control. That is not how you win wars. That is how you lose them, because institutions do not collapse all at once. They erode, quietly, repeatedly, until the gap between capability and reality becomes too wide to hide. And here is the connection. Revelation 1 showed you the physical asymmetry. Revelation 2 showed you the human vulnerability. This is the bridge between them. A system that cannot assign blame cannot deter action. A system that cannot deter action invites repetition. That is the loop. And the people inside that system, the officers, the analysts, the policymakers, they followed protocol. They acted within the rules. They escalated when authorized. They de-escalated when instructed. These were not disloyal actors. They were loyal to the institution. And that is the thing that got them overmatched. Now let us talk about the strategic logic Iran is applying, because this is not chaos. It is design. Iran does not need to close the Strait of Hormuz to win leverage. It only needs to make the world believe that it might. That uncertainty alone moves oil markets, insurance premiums, shipping routes, and military deployments. This is not a blockade strategy. It is a pressure strategy. Think World War II, U-boats, not sinking every ship, but forcing entire convoys, rerouting global logistics, raising costs across an entire system. Or think Thermopylae, a narrow passage where a smaller force turns geography into a weapon. Same principle, different century. And here is where the compound collapse begins. Each incident, each GPS disruption, each intercepted tanker, each warning statement makes global shipping slightly more cautious, slightly more expensive, slightly more fragile. And each increase in fragility makes the next disruption more effective. That is the loop. Now expand outward. China continues to import over 10 million barrels of oil per day, much of it passing through this corridor, according to IEA data, yet Beijing's response remains measured. India increases strategic reserves but avoids confrontation. European Union officials call for de-escalation, but commit no additional naval force beyond existing missions. And then there is the silence. No emergency UN Security Council resolution. No unified multinational escort coalition expansion. No red line clearly enforced. Their silence is the most eloquent statement possible, because every actor is calculating risk and quietly adapting to a new reality where disruption is normal. If this breakdown helps you understand what is actually happening, like this video, and share it with people who are trying to make sense of it, because the allies who might stabilize this have stepped back, and the force that threatens everything sits exactly where it was, undisturbed, watching. Now let us talk about what this means for you personally, because this is where the story stops being about navies and governments and starts being about you. Roughly 1 out of every 5 barrels of oil on Earth passes through that narrow corridor. When risk increases there, prices move everywhere. According to Goldman Sachs commodities forecasts and EIA data, even a perceived disruption can push oil prices up by $5 to $15 per barrel within days. That translates fast. Petrol prices rising 5% to 12% at the pump, electricity costs increasing as fuel inputs rise, food prices climbing because transport costs are baked into everything on your grocery receipt. That is not a forecast. That is already in your wallet. And it does not stop there. Shipping insurance premiums, called war risk premiums, have already spiked by as much as 20% in prior Gulf incidents, according to Lloyd's list. That cost gets passed down the chain. Manufacturers, retailers, and eventually, you. Even sectors you would never expect are exposed. AI data centers, the backbone of modern tech, depend on stable electricity and cooling infrastructure. Energy volatility drives up operational costs. That means higher service costs, slower expansion, and ripple effects across industries that depend on them. The system is connected. The Strait of Hormuz is not far away. It is upstream, and your daily life, your fuel bill, your grocery total, your job security, is downstream from it. The disruption did not create that uncertainty. It just made it impossible to ignore. There is a genuine counter-argument that requires honest acknowledgement. Presenting only one side is the kind of analysis we criticize in other outlets, and this channel is not going to do that. The argument is simple. The United States Navy still maintains overwhelming superiority, carrier strike groups, advanced missile defense, global logistics, and historically every major attempt to disrupt the Strait of Hormuz has ultimately failed. Fair point, we report it. According to the Pentagon and Congressional Research Service, the U.S. Navy fields unmatched force projection, and no sustained blockade of the strait has ever succeeded against it. But here is what experienced naval analysts at CSIS and reporting from Reuters understand that surface-level commentary apparently does not. Control is not binary anymore. You do not need to win a naval war to lose economic stability. Shipping traffic can drop 10–15% from risk perception alone. Insurance costs can surge without a single missile fired. Markets react to uncertainty, not outcomes. So yes, the Navy can keep the strait open. That is not the same as keeping it stable. The question is not whether the United States can defeat Iran in a direct confrontation. The question is whether it can prevent a system from unraveling without one. So where does this leave us? Let me give you two clear paths because there is no honest middle ground here. Path 1. Managed containment. In this scenario, escalation is avoided not through victory, but through calibration. First, back-channel diplomacy between Washington, Tehran, and Gulf intermediaries resumes quietly within days. Second, naval patrol coordination expands, involving the US, UK, and select regional partners under clearer engagement rules. Third, Iran maintains symbolic pressure but avoids direct physical interdiction of shipping lanes. Fourth, oil markets stabilize as insurance premiums peak and then slowly decline once risk signals flatten. Within 6 to 10 weeks, shipping returns to near normal levels, though elevated security remains permanent in practice. This path is possible, but here is the condition that makes it difficult. It requires all sides to accept ambiguity without turning it into escalation. And historically, that is rare in moments like this. In this outcome, nobody wins fully, but nobody loses control either. Path 2. Slow spiral. This is not a collapse in the Hollywood sense. There are no explosions, no dramatic headlines that mark a single breaking point. It is slower, not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily, irreversibly, like water eroding stone. First, shipping companies begin rerouting around perceived hotspots. Then insurance premiums become permanently higher for Gulf transit. Then long-term contracts shift away from dependency on the strait. Then regional actors adjust military posture permanently, not temporarily, and each adjustment makes the next one easier. Future historians will ask, how did they not see it coming? Some analysts inside energy markets have been warning about this structural fragility for years. Most were ignored because short-term stability always looked intact. I think we are closer to path 2 than the headlines suggest. But I also thought that before the 2023 escalation cycle, and then one incident changed everything. Here is what I keep coming back to. The Strait of Hormuz is not just geography, it is memory. Every crisis we have talked about, every tanker seized, every signal interference report, it all returns to the same narrow corridor of water that refuses to become stable, no matter how many forces are placed around it. And if you stand back far enough, something becomes clear. This is not Iran versus the United States in the way it is usually described. It is a system discovering its own limits, because power is not only what you can destroy, it is what you can prevent from breaking in the first place, and that prevention is no longer absolute. The Navy is not a political symbol here. It is a fire alarm pulled in a building where everyone assumed the wiring was perfect, and now the question is not whether the alarm is loud enough, It is whether the structure behind it can still be trusted. The global oil system was never permanently stable. It was temporarily cooperating. And now that cooperation is being tested in real time. So the question is no longer just about ships or missiles. It is this: can a global system built on uninterrupted flow survive when interruption becomes a strategy? Or is control over the world's most critical corridor always just one decision away from becoming something no fleet can fully guarantee? Share this with someone who still thinks the Strait of Hormuz is just another distant geopolitical headline. It is not. It is a live case study in how modern power, trade, and military deterrence collide in real time. And if you have been following closely, there are 3 questions worth asking, depending on who you are and what lens you view this through. First, the analytical question: if deterrence is still strong on paper, why do repeated disruptions keep occurring in the same narrow corridor without a decisive endpoint? Second, the accountability question: when global shipping is repeatedly placed under threat, but no single actor is formally held responsible in a way that changes behavior, who ultimately carries the burden of that instability? States, alliances, or markets? Third, the deeper question: is global economic stability ever truly permanent, or is it always temporarily cooperating until pressure reveals where it fractures first? If this analysis helped you see the structure behind the headlines, subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with the channel, because these stories are not static. They evolve by the day, not by the week. Like the video if you want more deep breakdowns like this. Share it so others understand the scale of what is unfolding. And I read every comment, especially the disagreements, because that is where the real picture becomes clearer. This channel exists to cover stories that are real, that have stakes, and that cannot be explained in surface-level headlines. Stay sharp.